Hey guys, just a quick guide on how to set yourself up as an elemental shaman for the Primal Council in the Vault of the Incarnates raid on all difficulties. First and foremost, I'm going to be approaching this from the perspective of the Wildfire build, but just know that the Lightning build is perfectly viable and has been seen in a lot of the top logs. It just doesn't see as much representation. So if that's more of your speed, feel free to go for that as well. While I do have a guide for the Lightning build on my channel, I actually don't have one for the Wildfire build, but fortunately the guys at Storm, Earth, and Lava have put together an amazing guide that includes summaries on how these builds work, as well as your priorities for each and every target count. So I highly recommend looking into that if you have any questions about the build overall. And that being said, we'll just go ahead and jump into the next part. I do have some weak aura strings that will be helpful if you struggle with keeping track of your flame shocks. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at that next. Alright, so as you can see here, I've got two different weak aura strings. There's one on the right here and there's one on the left. This one over here is very simple. It just keeps track of how many flame shocks you have out. Obviously your maximum is 6, but if one falls off, then it'll go down to 5, or if you only have 2 up, it'll only show 2. Meanwhile, this one over here on the right will tell you exactly what flame shock is on what target and the individual durations. This one's very bulky and may not be the best for you because it adds just a little bit more clutter. Obviously, you can change the size of it, but it might be a little bit too much information for some people. I kind of prefer the cleanliness of just kind of having just a little one and not having to worry about the actual durations. I usually personally do an okay job of tracking the durations just by looking on top of the nameplates, but sometimes in some situations when they're really clumped together, even if you have the stacking nameplates, sometimes they'll still get smushed together. So this will help you kind of keep track of it just a little bit better. But that being said, if you want something more detailed, then you can absolutely go with that as well. Both of these will be in the description down below so you can easily find them. So if that will be helpful to you, I highly suggest it. Just one more thing to kind of help keep track of your flame shocks. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the boss itself. So the build that I'm using is up on the screen right now, and the link to that import is in the description down below. So going into the very beginning of this pull, I did pull aggro off of one of them. Just make sure your tanks are actually grouped up before you actually start going in. Make sure also that you don't start tunneling right off the bat like I did here. This guy off to the left just keeps free casting and doesn't get grouped in. Make sure you're helping out people and actually helping with interrupts to make sure that they actually get grouped up. So one thing I want to point off right off the bat, we'll actually just go back a little bit because there's a lot that happened right there, a lot of like mistakes. But right off the bat, usually what your raid leaders are going to tell you to do is to spread out a little bit, but stay over here in this like little ring. But as soon as the pillars come up, I always try to move out to the right to get more room, but still kind of stay in this little archway here, because if you stay over here, it can get really crowded when the conductive marks come out. So just one thing that I like to do is just kind of be on the edge. You could also be back here, but you just want to make sure that you have enough space where you're not going to be clustered and spreading those marks. Also, this is on Mythic, but it's very hard to tell sometimes because this fight honestly plays out the same on all difficulties. As long as you approach it from a Mythic standpoint, you should be fine in any difficulty setting. So again, I'm going to kind of stay in this ring right here. I'm not going to move back out here. You'll notice when the conductive marks come out here, look how much we're already spread out with these marks. So this actually works out really well because of our spread. So just keep that in mind. You really don't want to be too bunched up here for conductive marks. And being the person to be proactive, because you get all these lava surges with this build, you can really be proactive with your movement since you have so many instant casts to use, whereas like Arcane Mage kind of has to plant its feet, or like Demonology or so on. So that allowed me to move out here to have more room. And then now the biggest thing, regardless of what build you're using, is to make sure you're not overcapping your Maelstrom. That is going to be the biggest problem in this fight, and the thing that I see that most shamans do wrong is they get so many procs, or they generate so much Maelstrom, that they're not spending quickly enough. It's not nearly as big of an issue with the Lightning build, but it can still be an issue. So make sure that you're constantly watching your Maelstrom. Put yourself in a position where you can keep track of it, and if you're getting close to capping, go ahead and drop that Earthquake. Make sure you're spending that stuff, because you are going to be getting a ton of procs with 4 targets. And if you're running splintered elements like I am here, then you're going to be getting a ton of haste, which means those flame shocks are going to be ticking that much faster, which means you're going to be you're just constantly going to be chucking out casts. So make sure you're watching that maelstrom. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you for this, is that your priority mentally should be on casting Earthquake and getting those out, and then trying to get rid of those lava surges as quickly as you can. You can just see like how many lava surges I'm getting. But anytime that you have a lull where you're not getting lava surges, make sure that you're using your chain lightning, especially if you have Power of the Maelstrom. But I'm getting so many that it's sometimes like just difficult to find time to even use chain lightning. And that's okay. If you're getting that many lava surges, then you can consistently just get out lava surges and forget about chain lightning. Make sure that you're always using your primordial wave on cooldown, because the more lava bursts you're getting out, the greater you're reducing the cooldown on primordial wave, so that you can get it back quicker and give yourself that haste again. Okay, so just that's the hardest thing, is because you constantly have 40% haste essentially with this build. It can be really hard to make decisions. So the biggest thing that I can tell you to do is make sure you're not capping Maelstrom, using your Lava Surge procs. If for whatever reason you don't have anything to press, that's when you press Chain Lightning. That's an easy way of thinking about it. That's like the easy mode way of thinking about it. If you get targeted one of these things, make sure you go where your raid leader has decided that you're going to be dropping these off. Make sure you don't just completely tunnel, but make sure you're still keeping up with, like right here, you notice I get an Ascendance proc and I go ahead and try to start setting up again. But again, maxing out on that Maelstrom, make sure that's constantly what you're thinking of. You are going to get overcapped with Maelstrom anytime that you hit an Ascendance. It's just what's going to happen. Your whole goal will be to be trying to manage that and get out as many Earthquakes as you humanly possibly can. Don't forget about Liquid Magma Totem also. It's kind of hard to find the right place to put it down, but it actually does do a ton of damage by itself. Even though I have Flame Shocks on everything, you're going to notice I'm going to go ahead and drop it right there. Not because I needed to spread Flame Shocks, but because it does do a lot of damage when you have 4 targets clumped up, especially when you're under the effects of Splintered Elements, which I'm not right now. I probably should have waited until I'd gotten a Splintered Elements. That's kind of like something I could have done better, is just wait for this next Primordial Surge, or Primordial Wave, before dropping your Liquid Magma Totem. That's one thing that I would actually suggest doing, is try to line those two things up as often as you can, because it is affected by haste. So this is actually a wipe that I'm showing, but I thought this was a really good example of just kind of how to set up and how you can handle when you get this much Maelstrom. So just keep these things in mind. Make sure you're paying attention to the length of time on your Flame Shocks, either with that weak aura string, or just be constantly staring at your nameplates if you have a way to track it that way as well. So like I said, this will be a wipe, but I think this was just a good attempt here to kind of show you how to handle your Maelstrom and just see how often I'm dropping Earthquakes. Because I feel like what I've seen in other people's logs when I've done some log digging for this video is that people are just overcapping Maelstrom, sometimes by as much as like 2,000 Maelstrom overcap. You're going to overcap Maelstrom, but it shouldn't be by this much. So just keep that in the back of your head. Make sure you're doing mechanics, but make sure that you're also dropping those Earthquakes. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, like I said, this is going to eventually lead to a wipe here. But it was probably one of our best pulls. On the pull, we actually do kill it. I was actually dead because I had to sacrifice for one of these puddles. We had already had a couple people dead. It was really low, and I died with one of these circles. So unfortunately, that's not the best way of showing how this fight works. But I felt like this pull was really good. So just make sure you're paying attention to the mechanics of the actual fight. They're very not difficult. There's just a lot of damage that your healers have to contend with. So just kind of keep that in mind. Focus on yourself, but make sure you're still paying attention to the mechanics. Just to reiterate here again, as you can see everyone dying, just to reiterate here, first and top priority is dropping those Earthquakes. Second priority is using those Lava Surges. And honestly, if you can just focus on those two things, you're going to do okay. Make sure you're keeping things on cooldown. Obviously, you don't want to leave your Stormkeepers on cooldown or off cooldown for too long. You don't want to be leaving your Liquid Magma Totem on cooldown or off cooldown for too long. And same thing, especially for Primordial Wave. With all of those Lava Surges you're going to be getting and all of the Lava Bursts you're going to be getting out, you're going to be reducing its cooldown so much with that Rolling Magma Totem. A rolling magma talent. So just make sure that you're paying attention to your cooldowns. If you don't have a weak aura string like this, I'd highly suggest it. For those of you who are interested, this is Luxthos's weak or strength for Shaman. So I can even put that in the description. Hopefully that'll help you, some of you guys out as well. But it just helps keep track of everything that I need to be keeping on cooldown. So as long as I see it that I haven't used it, I can just go ahead and use it. This fight is actually very kind to just being able to use your cooldowns as soon as you have them, essentially, because nothing changes throughout the fight. It's a static 4-target fight the entire way through. So hopefully that gives you some clarity on what you should be doing as an elemental shaman on this fight. If you have any questions, please let me know. Anything that you want me to do differently or see differently in the future, I stream at twitch.tv/Ridmark if you're interested in seeing me brick keys at the +20 level. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video.